A vulnerability sat at the heart of Unity for a decade. It hits every game made in that engine, and this last weekend we saw Unity and other companies have to react fast. Games were pulled down from stores, projects were hurriedly patched, companies tried to convince users that they were in fact protected. But beyond the initial danger, beyond the surge of activity, we kind of need to think about the deeper problem that's just been revealed. Because for a lot of games, their continued existence now poses a threat to you. And to understand what that means, we've got to know what the threat itself is. First things first though for this story, there's no evidence this exploit was used by any bad actor. That is absolutely good news. And really, every party here seems to be acting responsibly to protect your games and your hardware. That's definitely good, and some are even going arguably beyond what's necessary. But to start, let's go back to the problem itself. In June 2025, a cybersecurity firm, GMO Flat Security Research, identified a vulnerability in the Unity engine. It's one that would only impact PC, Mac, Linux, and Android users, which is of course still many millions of people. It could potentially allow, though, for local code execution at the security level Unity was running in. Meanwhile, information logged could be gathered from that application. The risk was rated as high, with a CVSS score of 8.4 out of 10. It's quite bad, and this vulnerability was present in Unity 2017.1. And that means it's been in every build of Unity for nearly a decade. So, here's the question. If it's been there for a decade, and if Unity have known since June, then why are we only finding out now? First thing, Unity didn't publicize this until they had already fixed the problem, and that happened on the 2nd of October. They'd also spoken to their platform partners to roll out solutions and customer protection tools. Now that started with patching all currently available versions of the Unity editor and providing a binary patcher to update any previously built project, which of course covers a huge number of projects. So now every affected project can have the vulnerability closed, and that means Unity can now openly talk about the problem and get ready for the next stage. That stage is warning users that they really have to listen to the developers who say, update your game. Because in theory, if people make the update, then this should be the end of the story, right? And really, everyone would have acted good. Unity were informed by a security consultant that there was a problem. They investigated, they addressed the problem, they only made the vulnerability public after it had been fixed. But you've seen the runtime of this video, it's not a YouTube short. And that means we've got to talk about what happened next and how the industry reacted, and how all of this ends up putting certain games in a very complex position. Some games have simply rolled out a patch, and with that, it's all basically done and fixed. That covers games like Among Us, Marvel Snap, No Rest for the Wicked, and loads that are already beyond the point of risk. That's great. Now, they announce that their users do need to download the patch for the security update ASAP, but here's the thing. Each one of those games is also a live service online title, so yeah, of course they can do an update fairly easily. Though for those kind of devs, there is some additional difficulty if your game's got anti-cheat or DRM tech. You'll need to effectively rebuild and redeploy to avoid triggering problems. But they're also uniquely placed to make sure that users are protected with their latest build, because if you don't have the updated game, you can't play the game. And if you can't play the game, then there is no risk. So that should be good. As for developers currently building their games, well, they just need to update to the latest version of the engine. That's all good. Though they would have to deal with any bugs or problems that, come from updating to a new build of the engine. But some companies are being particularly zealous in their protections, especially when they're not constantly updating builds. Because that's the thing about games. Once you finish patching them, developers are meant to walk away and do other work. Now, well, it's a bit of a rough position, because leaving your old game alone will put users at risk. Unity was very explicit here, and here's it in their own words. There is no need to pull games or applications off any platforms, but some companies are not in a position to roll out patches immediately, so even in spite of what Unity said, yeah, they're pulling games. And that's what led Microsoft, and especially Bethesda, to pull their games from sale until they can be sure that users can't be harmed. And that means Hearthstone, Wasteland 3, Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire, and many others are being pulled from download as of the time of us doing this video. Some have been pulled and then put back up, like say Pentiment or the original Pillars of Eternity. It's simply a question of how fast someone can get these updated across all platforms. But part of the problem here is also Unity's ubiquity. Of course, it's used for more than just games. Even the digital art books for Avowed and Grounded 2 are actually running on Unity, even though those games are made, I believe, in Unreal. So now those need to be patched as well. So this has meant that across the industry, there are people going down lists of games trying to get this fixed, get builds deployed, because, well, if a game is not updated, it is an actual risk to users. That can include games that are on your computer right now. Obviously, companies cannot have that, especially when they possess the tools to fix the problem. And of course, they can't risk being a danger to their users. But here's some of the good news, because from the side of a user, well, it turns out the platforms are actually stepping up. So Microsoft have updated Windows Defender, Android has got a built-in scanner in their store, and Steam just released a client update for users. And the good news is these effectively protect users and platforms from any game that has not yet been patched. As an example, the Steam update will scan a game on startup for certain command line parameters, the ones that Unity warned them about, and if it finds them in a game that you're launching, you'll get a pop-up window warning you that the game may put you at risk. But that leads to a question. What if a game never gets updated? Some games will simply not survive this vulnerability. Maybe they don't have active development teams. Maybe they're old. I mean, for Microsoft alone, games like Gears Pop, Mighty Doom, and Elder Scrolls Legends are going down because, well, there's nobody working on those games to actually run the update. So they're just gone from sale entirely. And that's actually where the real danger is. You see, for all the faults of Unity, its greatest strength was approachability. It was accessible for devs at many skill levels. It could be used for many projects. And that now means every project released since 2017 could be a threat vector. Unless, of course, the original dev, or at least somebody, is around to update the damn thing. Now that means that abandonware made in Unity after 2017 is now something you could have to be careful with. And that could mean a lot of games. I mean, think about how many studios that we have covered on this channel that have closed since 2020, even ones with really good games. Those games likely can't be updated. Even beyond that, how many companies have laid off teams and slimmed down where, the ability and the knowledge required to do the patching could just be gone? I mean, just think about every game in itch.io that was put together by students or hobbyists who have long since moved on and forgotten their logins. And of course, so far, we've been mostly talking about PC rather than, say, Android, where there are simply more games, all of which may face the same problems. And it at least seems that the Android side of things can't be fixed that easily. Now, on a systemic level, Apple's App Store does actually have a policy that would help out here, where it removes apps that haven't been updated for 2 or more years, which basically would mean users would eventually be protected from a legacy security problem like this. But sure, there are some security benefits, but it also does mean the developers can't just be, done with a project, and culturally, that could be a lot more damaging. Is purging out an entire library every few years really the right answer? Especially thinking about preservation, I'm going to err on the side of no, and that's especially if we extrapolate out from one of the industry's defining trends right now, which of course is, well, stuff kind of going to shit, and companies closing down and no longer being able to support games. A good way to think about this is in context of the industry's shift away from bespoke engines to just using off-the-shelf technology, which in many ways has been a good thing. But on the other hand, everyone is complaining about stuttering issues caused by the adoption of Unreal Engine 5. I know, Tim Sweeney just replies to that saying, Lamau skill issue. And he does actually have a point. A lot of that can actually be fixed. It's just that games come out too damn early before they're properly optimized. But as the industry is homogenizing around common tooling, well, there's a lot of good stuff that we get. Shared experience, right? People working on the same tools across different companies. That's good for standardized knowledge. It's good for hiring. But it does also mean every project being worked on is only as resilient as the people who made the tools that project is built with. And today's story is just one example of that. If you are, say, in the development space, You probably know about the NPM vulnerability about like 3 or so weeks ago. That was another big example of like tens of millions of people use NPM. It's a JavaScript package manager. But yeah, there's a vulnerability in that, which basically just hit everyone. And well, whenever we're using a lot of common tools, this is the sort of thing that we've got to deal with. It's a good thing then that we've got security researchers, we've got security consultancy firms like the ones, you know, the white hats who brought this to Unity, where it was all dealt with properly, such that now the vulnerability, yes, it is known about, but we've also got the tools to fix it. And with that said, we're at the end of the video. The good news is I've got another one for you. It is essentially the StarCraft 2 revival, the spiritual successor that doesn't really seem to be happening. You can learn about how Frost Giant and ex-Blizzard team is very much having struggles in this video next.